Hello, everyone, and welcome to another, but also the final episode of my vinyl collection series. And when I say the final episode, all I mean by that is just up to this point, as of the recording of this episode, these are the last records that I have yet to cover in my collection. Hopefully, you've been following along. If not, what I'll say is this series has been going through the various genres of vinyl records I have. There's been about 6 videos at this point, if I'm not mistaken. And I also have a series that is ranking various discographies of artists who I happen to have their entire discography on vinyl. So some of my vinyl is covered in those videos, but most of my vinyl has been covered in these videos. And I have now reached the end of this series in that the stack of records that's next to me right now is the rest, the ones I haven't talked about yet. So future videos regarding my vinyl collection will be like vinyl updates, where, after 3 months of purchasing various records, I have enough of a stack to go, okay, here are the ones that have just been added to my collection over the last 3 months or so. For now, as of this recording, this is it. This is the last of it. And this episode is kind of just all the other records. It's not specified to one genre. These are all the records that I felt weren't big enough genre-wise to fit in their own video. Or honestly, I didn't really know what bubble to throw them in. Like, some of these are rock, some of these are pop, but they're kind of their own amalgamations of that I didn't want to throw them in those videos. So this is probably going to be called like the miscellaneous collection or whatever, just because there's so many different genres represented here. So let's get to it, because this first record exemplifies that pretty well, which is Daft Punk's Discovery. This is more of like EDM, electronic dance music, but I wouldn't say it fits into any of the other genres I covered up to this point. So to start off with this record, complete classic, one of the great electronic dance records of the 2000s, arguably probably the best. Also arguably Daft Punk's best record. Random Access Memories is also a close one for me. There's some days where I put that slightly above. That's also a record I wish I had on vinyl. I don't. But this thing's amazing. The hits on this have been Daft Punk's biggest hits forever. You got One More Time, Digital Love, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, Something About Us, which is one of my favorite Daft Punk songs. This whole thing's amazing. And it's really upsetting that Daft Punk quit when they did. They're artists. They can do what they want. I have no sway over an artist's viewpoint of what they can and can't do. It's upsetting to see that Daft Punk, broke up, so to speak, or called it quits, because really their discography's not that big. You've got, 5 studio albums, a soundtrack album in Tron, and like 2 live records. It's a nice collection, but all their stuff's been great. You wish they could have done more. And I don't have this on vinyl either, but Alive 2007 might be my favorite live album of all time. The energy on that thing is just absolutely unreal. I would love to have that on vinyl, but I'm sure that's like $100, even if it is. I don't even know if it's on vinyl, honestly. But anyway, Discovery, this record, amazing. Absolutely perfect, fantastic, love everything about it. And now we go to something completely different, because technically speaking, that's the only electronic dance music album I even have. We move into post-rock, with Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven by Godspeed You Black Emperor. And if you don't know this band, and if you don't know this album, that probably sounded like a mouthful, and it is. I probably could have thrown these guys into the rock episodes, but I didn't feel like that was necessary. The idea behind post-rock is that it's rock influenced, but it's not really rock, in my opinion. This is more like just progressive music in general. This record is phenomenal. One of my favorite probably my favorite record in post-rock, but one of my favorite records of the 2000s. I absolutely love this thing. I think the first 7 minutes of this album is one of the most beautiful compositions of music ever. And then very quickly from there, it gets very dark and depressive and kind of apocalyptic. This is a 2-hour album, if I'm not mistaken. Is it 2 hours? I should know that. It's a long album. It's only 4 tracks, and yet those 4 tracks, I definitely know this album's at least an hour and a half, if not more. It's a long listen. It's a difficult listen, right? It's not easy. Most of the lyrics, quote unquote, is just like spoken word interviews. But if you haven't listened to Godspeed before, you really should give yourself a chance to try it out. I'm not saying it's everybody's cup of tea. I'm sure most people listen to this thing and just turn it off. But like I said, the first 7 minutes of the first song, which is, of course, it doesn't say. Oh, man, I should know this. I'm pretty sure it's sleep. It's sleep static, whatever, right? I'm sorry. These videos have proven that I'm not the smartest music person in the world. This record's great. I love it. It's the only Godspeed record I have, unfortunately. I'd love to get more. Obviously, records cost money, so I can't just, magically get all of them. But maybe one day it'll happen. And if it does happen, maybe I'll do a Godspeed ranking, if that were to happen. Moving on from there, we go to a very small collection of jazz records, or things that fall into that persuasion. The first being Dave Brubeck's Take 5. If you know jazz at all, you should know this record. Dave Brubeck, of course, famous jazz piano player. Take 5, often regarded as one of the greats, not just of the 50s, which I think this was released in, but just jazz in general. Even if you aren't familiar with jazz, you've probably heard Take 5. It's pretty infamous, pretty great. It's one of those records where like the back is just like liner notes, basically, which I appreciate this. It's very retro. It's very nostalgic, but it's also cool. They give little snippets of, what each song is and how they came about it and how it conceptually became a thing. It's cool. Sometimes I prefer that to just the tracks. They list the tracks on here, but they give little backgrounds. Unlike Godspeed, which doesn't even list any track. It's just like an image. Again, artists can do what they want. Yeah, this thing's great. For my money, though, the great standout of this is Blue Rondo a la Turk. That song is crazy, especially time signature-wise. To think that they came up with that back then, pretty phenomenal. It's good stuff. It's jazz essentials. I actually don't have Kind of Blue, which is another jazz record that is usually in like everybody's vinyl collection. It's just like one of those vinyl collection records you should get. I don't have it yet. If it's anywhere under 20, I'm snap buying it, but there's other records I would rather have. This is jazz, but it's more Christmas jazz, and that would be the Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack. The gold is really catching the reflection of everything. It's crazy. Man, I love this thing. This is when, you have those things where it's like a certain thing represents a time for you. Like a certain movie epitomizes Halloween, or hot dogs and hamburgers epitomize Memorial Day or July 4th or whatever. What epitomizes Christmas to me is putting up the Christmas tree with this playing. Like, this is my Christmas album. If I'm going to listen to Christmas music, this is my number one pick. I adore this thing. It's so good. It's so good. So iconic. That freaking, I'm looking at this track list and so much of it is great. But the main theme, like that, forget about it. If that thing comes on, I don't care if it's the hottest day of summer. Like, I am immediately in a Christmas mood when that comes on. This thing is so embodies Christmas, and it is jazz infused, obviously, so it kind of fits that bill. But really, it's a Christmas record at the end of the day, and in my opinion, it's the best one. Another Christmas record, but more in the rock camp, is Trans-Siberian Orchestra's The Ghosts of Christmas Eve, which I believe this was their first record, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I could be wrong. My dad, at one time in his life, was the biggest Trans-Siberian Orchestra fan. He had all their stuff on CD. He would play it constantly around Christmas time. And so I kind of just got introduced to it via him. I actually did see these guys live, and admittedly, they put on a pretty good show live. But this is back in like middle school, 8th grade. So this is a while back. But as just a record, this one's good. It's got their version of O Come All Ye Faithful, O Holy Night. Christmas Eve Sarajevo is on here, which is probably their most famous song, or at least most popular song. It's good. It's a song, or it's an album that I'll throw on around Christmas time. Any other time of the year, I'm not really interested in listening to it. But when the holidays roll around, when Christmas, December rolls around, I'll throw it on just to have it there. Now we move into like singer-songwriter camp, kind of folky, kind of rocky, etc. And we start that with Sufjan Stevens, Illinois. Shout out to Will Kistler for getting me this on vinyl. Much appreciated, my dude. But this thing's so good. I know I say that about a lot of records, that they're so good, but the reason I have them on vinyl is because I think they're really good. What's funny about this record is that Sufjan Stevens was going to do a 50 states discography where he would do a record for every single one of the 50 states. In other words, 50 records. He did Illinois, as you can see, but I don't think he did any others. If he did, he may have done like one or two more. And then, like, you kind of get over the idea of doing that unless he does it one day. But his last several records have not been anything themed to a state. So one can assume it's probably not going to happen. But this record is iconic. Chicago is on here, which, again, one of his most famous songs. But the title track is amazing. John Wayne Gacy Jr. is amazing. Yeah, they're Night Zombies. My favorite song, though, has to be The Tallest Man, the Broadest Shoulders. That main like piano riff that they do in the song, so good. And all the performances on here are good, especially Sufjan himself, who just like vocally kills it on this record. It's phenomenal. It's great. If you haven't listened to it, you should. Moving on from there, though still in the singer-songwriter camp, is perhaps one of the most depressing listens of all time, and that is Bon Iver's Forever Ago. Some people say Bon Iver or Bon Iver or Bon Iver. I say like Bon Iver. I don't know if that's right, but that's what I've been saying forever. Man, this record came into my life at just the right time, which is to say that it came in my life in like the most depressive time of my life. Between high school and starting college, I spent that summer graduating high school and before college started. 3 days after I graduated high school, I moved away from my childhood home of 13 years, left all my friends behind, left everything I knew behind, and went with my parents to South Carolina, where I've stayed to this day. And at the time, I didn't really take it well, as an 18-year-old would, who, fresh out of graduating high school, loses all his friends. I mean, I didn't lose them, right? But physically, they weren't around anymore. If I wanted to hang out with my friends, I had to drive 11 hours to go see them. I felt really isolated. I felt really lonely. I felt like, man, I'm on my own right now. And this record was a record I was listening to at that time, which, if you don't know the story behind this, Justin Vernon, who is the guy behind Bon Iver, he was set to marry a woman. I don't know the exact details other than the woman that he was engaged to sometime before the wedding was supposed to happen called it off. And they were like, this was like his great love, his like childhood sweetheart. I don't know if that's actually what it was, but he was very indebted to this woman. And then she just cold turkey cut it off. And so in his depression, Justin went into, very Bruce Springsteen of him, went into like the mountains of Montana, Wisconsin, something like that, and just like wrote this record. And you hear it, man. This is like a dude at the depths of depravity. And yet, in spite of that, it's such a beautiful record. I love the sound of this thing. It's so chilling and cozy at the same time, right? It's one of those like oxymoron albums where one vibe is like, man, I am just like really feeling the depression here, right? This is the depths of like human emotion. And then at the same time, you're also like, but man, does it sound gorgeous? Does it sound beautiful? I absolutely love it. It's a difficult listen just because you can hear how like upset Justin Vernon is on this record. But, art, music, it heals. It's perhaps the greatest thing about humanity is the creative spirit, the ability to like make art and have other people feel something about it. When I listen to this record, man, I feel things, but in a good way, not in a negative way. And again, it's a record that I kind of needed in my life, where it's like, yeah, man, you're going to go through life feeling pretty shitty sometimes, but you're not alone. It's okay. You will get through it. And honestly, moving to South Carolina was like one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. Because I think of where I am now, which is like 12 years later from when I moved here, and all I've experienced and who I've met and where I am in life, my job, etc. And it's like better. I think my life would have been, this sounds terrible to say, but I think my life would have been worse off if I stayed in Cincinnati. You know what I mean? Like moving here, I feel more inclined to say, okay, I did the right thing in moving here all those years ago. Of course, that's, hindsight, and I didn't take the path where I stayed in Cincinnati my entire life. Maybe something else would have happened that's great, but who knows? All I know is that I'm much better than I was when I first moved here, and that's a great thing. Anyway, let's continue. Legend, Bob Marley. This is one of those albums that people just have in their collection. Often regarded as one of the greatest hits records of all time. As far as reggae music is concerned, is there anybody better than Bob Marley? I just wanted to show off. This is the fun Jamaican colors, the Jamaican flag colors of red, yellow, and green. It's cool. Yeah, it's legend, right? If you know music to any capacity, you should know of this record. You should know Bob Marley. You should know these songs. Most of them are fantastic. Some of them, admittedly, I'm just kind of like, it's fine. Like, it's good background music, but the real hits on here are like standout hits. My favorite song by far by Bob Marley is Three Little Birds. I think that song is gorgeous and beautiful. But like Exodus, I Shot the Sheriff, Is This Love, No Woman, No Cry, Buffalo Soldier, Get Up, Stand Up. Like, it's just a smattering of just like great songs. And as far as reggae music is concerned, this is about the end all be all of it. You know, obviously that's terrible to say for all the other reggae artists throughout history, but no one is nearly as famous as Bob Marley. No one's had nearly of an impact as Bob Marley. He's just kind of cemented himself as the king of the genre, which it's arguable, but I don't think any other genre of music has such a cemented like flagpole holder of like this one person is the person when it comes to this genre. Like you could say Michael Jackson for pop or the Beatles for rock, but for me, it's not nearly as close as like Bob Marley for reggae. He's just like the guy when it comes to reggae music. Like I bet 9 out of 10 people when they think reggae music immediately think Bob Marley. Whereas I wouldn't say 9 out of 10 people when they think rock music immediately think the Beatles. There are probably some, but like you see the divide I'm trying to get for it. Amazing record. Neutral Milk Hotel and the Aeroplane Over the Sea, perhaps the most meme record of all time. Personally, I think it's a potato, which is the head of this woman. Some people say it's tambourine. To me, it's potato. I like this record a lot. I don't love it. It's a little too, I don't want to say pretentious, but there's moments on this record where you just kind of like go, man, what? Like the whole I love you, Jesus Christ, which I love that moment because it's so ridiculous, but you hear it and a first time listener would be like, that's very weird. And this album is very weird if you've never heard it. But at the same time, it's also kind of great. There's a lot to love about it. A lot of people adore this thing. Anthony Fantano, shout out to him. He loves this thing. I don't love it. It's in my collection. It was cheap. I found it for relatively cheap, so I figured to pick it up. It's there. Some would argue this is a vinyl collection record. You must have it in your collection. I'm not one of them. I enjoy it for what it is, but that's about it. So I'm just going to leave it at that. My dog is currently on the coffee table, so that's fun. This is the Fleet Foxes with Helplessness Blues. Easily my favorite record of theirs. I think that this showcases their best effort in their entire career. Not to say that everything else they've made is bad. Certainly not. But this is a record that came out in the early 2010s, if I'm not mistaken. And man, does it capture a vibe. Now, where Bon Iver was like upset isolation vibe, this is like uplifting isolation. The first song on this thing, Montezuma. Oh my God, it's so good. Listen to Montezuma. Again, it's the first track on this record. And just picture yourself like camping in the mountains. And you open up your tent flap and the sunrise is like cresting over the mountaintops. And it's like this picturesque, beautiful view of nature. There's like birds chirping. You can see like deer in the distance. That is Montezuma. And that is this whole record, to me at least. It gives me that vibe. This is very much like a... It's not winter. It's not summer. I would say it's either spring or fall. And I'm going to say probably like early fall. Like summer into fall is what this record is. Whereas Forever Go by Bon Iver is like harsh winter. It's like dead of winter. This is like transitioning into fall. It's like that beautiful period where like it's getting cooler out, more relaxing than like 95 degrees like we have around here. Regardless, it's a great record. In particular, Montezuma, that first song, love that thing. So good. Continuing that sort of like folk artist feel, we have Mumford and Sons with Babel or Babel. I like it a lot. As far as Mumford and Sons go, this is probably my favorite Mumford and Sons record and probably my only really liked Mumford and Sons record. There's some other songs on some of the other records I like, but none of them come quite close to Babel for me. I think this has their greatest hits on it, even though it's not even a greatest hits record. But you think of like I Will Wait, Lover of the Light, Whispers in the Dark, Hopeless Wanderer, like so many good songs here. And I think their performances on here are just the best. You know, they were hungry. They had that first record, which had that song "The Cave," I think, on it, which was definitely the song that like made them big. And then they followed that up with this, and I think they just knock it out of the park on this record. It's unfortunate, at least in my opinion, to say that they kind of didn't ever hit this level again. So they peaked again, in my opinion. Not saying this is the facts, but at least to me, they peaked early on in their career, and then the rest of the stuff they made was just kind of like, it's fine, it's there. This record's great though, absolutely love it. You can see that we're starting to like go down a path of a genre and then immediately 180 into another one, and that's what we're doing here with, I guess, pop, but I don't know. Barbra Streisand with Memories. This was a greatest hits record released in like the 80s. Yeah, in the 80s. So it's got a lot of her like early to mid career greatest hits. It's not like 90s and later hits that she had. And the funny thing is that I am fain to say that a year from now, or rather a year ago, I should say, I was not a Barbra Streisand fan at all. Literal zero. In fact, if you said, hey, what's your favorite Barbra Streisand song? I couldn't tell you. Like, I just couldn't tell you a single song she wrote, sang, whatever. Like, you know the name, especially being a guy in theater, you've heard this name be flung around, and all this praise and admiration is thrown her way, but you've never experienced it yourself, so you're just like, man, I don't like Barbra. I don't even know who Barbra Streisand is. Like, who is this person? And then a funny thing happened, which was January of 2024, so still this year at the time of recording. I was in a show called Buyer and Seller. It was a one-man show, so it was me on stage for 2 hours. And the concept of the show is that a guy works out of the basement of Barbra Streisand's Malibu complex. Look it up. It's a very long-winded story that's actually ridiculous. She does actually have a like basement shopping mall. It's a whole thing. The point is, after doing this show, I became a mega Barbra Streisand fan. I did the show. I listened to the audiobook of her biography, which came out this year as well. And so when it came around to it, I'm like, man, I need one of her records. I think she's amazing. It just so happened that my fiance picked this record up like several years ago, just being like somewhat of a Barbra notarizer. It was like, yeah, I kind of bought it just because I bought it. And I was like, I need this thing. So she kind of like shifted it over to my side of the collection because she's not a huge Barbra fan. I am a huge Barbra fan. So a lot of the great songs are on here. Her cover of Memory is amazing. No More Tears. But then you get to Evergreen and The Way We Were on the second half, which are two of my favorite Barbra songs. Beautiful, gorgeous. I now love Barbra Streisand. She's one of my favorite female singers of all time. Just phenomenal. I think she's great. I love her a lot. And if you know the name but don't know the music, don't make my mistake. I would recommend going out there and actually listening to one of her records. This is a very good one. It's a very good summation of who Barbra is and like her great works. So I would definitely recommend Memory if you're just looking to like get a first dipping of the toe in the water, as it were. So for the last several records, we're actually going to move into soundtracks / musical theater. So you'll see what I mean by this, but all the rest of these records are like made for a show, whether it be a TV show, a movie, a Broadway show, just so that they're a lot of different songs. So we get to the soundtrack for the third season of Stranger Things, which the sleeve is making it very hard to see. Not that this is going to be any better. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Okay, so we have the third season of Stranger Things. Now, if you watch Stranger Things, you know that every season has very good song choices. They just have a good knowledge of like what's a good song choice for this. So this is a record, or rather a soundtrack that has a lot of different songs from a lot of different bands. For example, Baba O'Reilly by The Who, Material Girl by Madonna, Cold as Ice by Foreigner, Can't Fight This Feeling by REO Speedwagon. It's good. Like I said, it's a good collection of vinyl. And in fact, this is a gatefold, which is always fun. You can see that. Here's my thing with Stranger Things 3, however. I will say the soundtrack is good. It's not my favorite. We're about to get to my favorite. Stranger Things 3, though, that season, I'm inclined to call it complete garbage. I hated that season of the show. I'm one of those people that thought Stranger Things should have ended after season 1. Season 1 is by far and away the best season of Stranger Things. It's not even close. Because what Stranger Things 1 did is they had a really great show from top to bottom, great performances, very great Stephen King energy, right? It's a total Stephen King book turned into a show. And you could have just easily ended it at the end of season 1. It's got a Stephen King ending where it's like, oh, is 11 alive? Probably. But do we need the rest of the story? No. And then they go, oh, shit, it made us $1 billion. Let's make 15 of them. And so they make season 2. It's fine. It's whatever. They get to season 3, and I think it is complete horrendous trash. You ruin half the characters. Half the characters are so unlikable in this season. And spoilers for season 3. The only great moment this season had was when Hopper sacrificed himself at the end. And guess what shortly thereafter happens, about 5 minutes later? Oh, Hopper's alive. He's not dead. He's cool. Fuck you, dude. The one good thing you had was Hopper was a great character. Was a great character. And this noble sacrifice of him choosing to sacrifice himself for this proto-child he has taken on. It's a beautiful character arc, and it's a great way to close that character arc. Nope, fuck it. Bring him back, because he's a fan favorite character. Stupid. Terrible writing. I'm sorry, it's trash tier writing. This whole season was pretty bad tier writing. By far and away, the crappiest season of the show. Just awful. Awful. After season 3, I was like, they need to stop, right? If the rest of the seasons are going to be this bad, just call it quits. Of course, they're not going to. And of course, shortly thereafter, they were like, hey, by the way, season 4 is coming. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. Why? You don't have to run a show into the ground. Just know when it's good and then stop from there. But I'll take the sleeve off this one as well. The thing with season 4 is that it's my second favorite season of the show. Now, should it be a thing? No. Again, the show should have ended after season 1. But season 4, I think, is the best iteration of the show since season 1. It still has a lot of problems. Why did nobody die? Right? You're dealing with a very serious threat in Vecna, who I love Vecna as a villain. Easily the best villain in all of Stranger Things. And he's imposing, and he's intimidating, and he's dangerous. He's a real threat. And then not a single one of these teenagers is killed by him. Give me a fucking break. That's not, again, that's bad writing. You could have easily killed Max. You could have easily killed Lucas. One of them is all I'm asking. Just one meaningful death. We get literal 0. And it's just stupid. It's so dumb. But overall, the show has good moments. Eddie is a great character. And on top of it, I think this is the best soundtrack throughout the entire season of the show. And I'm speaking towards the guest songs, not the actual orchestrations and original soundtrack. I'm talking taking other bands' music and throwing them into the show. I think this is the best collection by far. First of all, using Master of Puppets in a show, you've already got me won over. So that was a great moment. But then you've got so many good songs on this thing. I mean, California Dreamin', Running Up That Hill. I mean, that song got a second life because of this show. The amount of stuff I saw on TikTok for Running Up That Hill. Play With Me by Extreme. What a great deep cut choice. Detroit Rock City by Kiss. Easily my favorite Kiss song. Just so much good stuff here. As far as the record and choice of it goes, it's fantastic. It's amazing. As far as the season itself goes, I did enjoy it, admittedly, but it continued the trend of just bad writing issues and bad writing choices. So I can't recover from that. But I will say, as far as a soundtrack for the Stranger Things series goes, it's easily my favorite. It's got a lot of good stuff. Now, moving on to a show that I think is brilliant, that I think is great writing, great everything across the board, would be the soundtrack for the Netflix show Midnight Mass by the absolutely insane god that is Mike Flanagan. Not to toot his horn or whatever, but Mike Flanagan is probably my favorite showrunner of the current era. Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorite shows ever. Bly Manor, it was okay. It was good. It wasn't bad, but it was just whatever. Midnight Mass, though, probably one of my favorite shows of all time at this point. There's two things I love more than anything in terms of like horror fiction. Vampires. I really am a sucker for vampires. Salem's Lot by Stephen King is my favorite novel ever. And the second thing is religious zealotry, right? Taking religion and showcasing why it's stupid and why it's got its problems, or at least organized religion, right? And this show does it so well. Using vampires as a metaphor for like organized and cultish religious behavior, genius choice. And so this is obviously the soundtrack. Now, this is 3 vinyls. So there's 6 sides to this thing. The first vinyl is all the hymnals of the show. So if you watch the show, you know there's a lot of hymnals because it deals with religion and church. So there's a lot of that. The second and third vinyl are just like the original score of the show, which is good. But why I really bought this thing was for the hymnals. Even though I have a very negative view of religion, I love me a good hymnal. I love me a good religious hymnal. They slap, dude. Like, especially when you get pipe organ involved, forget about it. I'll go to church every Sunday if there's a pipe organ. But I think this album, I think the soundtrack's very good. But the show in particular, I fucking love Midnight Mass. I don't know if it's my favorite show of all time, but it's definitely like a top 5er for me. Absolutely adored everything about it. So when people say they don't like it, I'm like, what about it didn't you like? I would love to hear that conversation. And if you feel free to do so in the comments, by all means. Obviously, this is more music related than show related, but you know, we can have that conversation as well. Whitney Houston's The Bodyguard. Now, this is a trash movie. It's a bad movie. It's stupid. It's poorly written. It's whatever. I was actually in the musical version of this, the stage musical. I played the stalker, believe it or not. I'm sure I've got the face for it. And the play is even worse than the movie. It's just stupid. It's trash writing. It's not very good plot writing, whatever. But man, does the soundtrack kick ass, dude. This is such a good soundtrack. And it's largely because Whitney Houston was really good at what she did. And the songs on here are phenomenal. You've got I Will Always Love You is on this thing, which is like not only Whitney Houston's biggest hit, but like one of the biggest recognizable songs ever, perhaps. I'm Every Woman is amazing. Run to You, Queen of the Night. Where's it going to be? What's the name of that one? You know, whatever, right? It's great. It's really good stuff. Don't let the music speak for the movie. If you've never seen the movie, don't bother. It's stupid. But if you never heard the soundtrack to the movie, I think you should. It's really damn good. A lot of really great Whitney Houston stuff on it. Again, unfortunate that she died in the way she died, and she left us when she did. I think, admittedly, she is one of the greats. You can't take that away from her, no matter how much personal crap she had to deal with. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So to conclude this, I have 3 Broadway soundtracks, shows made for Broadway, and the original cast recordings of the Broadway version as well. So this was originally an animated movie, but they eventually decided to adapt the animated Anastasia for the stage, the Broadway stage. Let me start with the animated movie. Probably one of my favorite non-Disney animated movies. A lot of people mistake it for being a Disney movie. It's not. It's, if I'm not mistaken, 20th Century Fox. I don't think DreamWorks did it, right? I think it was 20th Century Fox. I think it's phenomenal. It's not, you know, it's very 90s animation. Like, it's very much of that style. Rasputin as a villain's kind of absurd, but you just kind of go with it. But what I really love about that movie is some of the music is amazing in it. And so as you can imagine, with the stage adaptation of it, they take all the really good songs from the movie and just put them into here. They get rid of Rasputin as a villain because it just wouldn't make any sense, and it's kind of stupid to begin with. And they replace him with Gleb, which is this like Russian guy who has it out for Anastasia, played by Ramin Karimloo in the original Broadway recording, who's like my favorite Broadway singer of all time in terms of male vocalists. So like I said, all the great songs from the movie are in here. You've got Once Upon a November and Journey to the Past. So many good songs. If I Can Learn to Do It, you can, whatever, right? If I Can Learn to Do It, you can do it, whatever, that song. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. But then the songs they add, right? Because you can't just go off the movie songs. There's just not enough of them, right? It's a musical. You need like a lot of more songs. The songs they add to this thing are so good. There's so many good additions. In My Dreams is amazing. My Petersburg, phenomenal. The Neva Flows and Still, which are Ramin's songs, are fantastic. And then you get In a Crowd of Thousands, which is such a beautiful duet between Anastasia and the guy, right? Unfortunately, I'm blanking on his name right now. Man, I love this thing. It's so good. And it doesn't get enough credit for how good it is. I think a lot of people figured this show was like, oh, it's another adaptation, right? It's another Frozen. It's another Shrek the Musical. It's like these animated movies getting turned into Broadway stage preparations, performances. And like, I'll give you it. Yes, there's so many Broadway shows that are just like, why do we need this? Why do we need a Frozen adaptation? Why do we need a Shrek adaptation? But I promise you, this is not one of them. This one is actually taken seriously. And the music they add to this thing is phenomenal. It's so good. It's like on par with the songs from the original movie. So if you're not taking the time to listen to this, you can find a very good slime tutorial online if you so wish. But it's real damn good. Easily one of my favorite Broadway shows of the 2010s. Going to one of my favorite Broadway shows of all time, A Chorus Line. And this is actually the original 1960-ish Broadway cast recording. I love A Chorus Line. Admittedly, this is probably... Is it my favorite musical? It might be my favorite musical, but it's not the best musical by far. I think the show has issues with like pacing and stuff. I don't think it's the greatest musical of all time. But it's definitely one of my favorites just because it kind of got me into theater. In college, my freshman year, I had no interest in doing theater at all. Absolutely no aspirations to do it. And then in my fall semester of sophomore year, I had to take a theater class as part of my electives. And as part of that, I had to go see a bunch of shows that the college was putting on. And I had zero interest, right? I was like, I don't want to go spend money on this. This is stupid. I don't want to spend my time doing this. And it just so happened that that semester they were doing a production of A Chorus Line. And I was sitting in that theater in that black box space at 79th Avenue. And I was like, man, this looks like a hell of a lot of fun. I think I could try. I don't know if I'm going to be any good, but I could try. And so the next day, or rather it was the weekend. So that following Monday, I went into the theater offices on my college campus and said, is there anything I can do? Which then led to me getting a minor in theater, which has now led to literally 10 years of doing shows, right? I'm on my 10th year of performing in theatrical productions. I kind of have to owe it all to A Chorus Line in that particular production that Coastal did. So there's that. Beyond that, I actually think the show is just good overall. I think it's pretty great. I love the concept of it, which is just a bunch of artists talking about their experiences of trying to make it in their dreams and their goals. And the show's like, yeah, some people just don't make it, but some do. And if you keep trying, eventually your dreams might just come true, but you got to keep trying. You can't give up. And I love that message. It's a very realistic human perspective on like being an artist. Absolutely adore it. One of my favorites of all time. But by far and away, my favorite Broadway show of the 2010s would have to be, not even close, Hadestown. It's such a big vinyl collection that they literally had to put it in a box. Hadestown is just, pardon my French, I know I've cursed a lot on Album Fight Club, but this thing's fucking brilliant. It's so perfectly done. I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology, so the whole narrative of this thing automatically has me in. Taking the sort of like approach they do with the music, which has like a blues, New Orleans fusion to it. It's so goddamn good. The performances on the original Broadway cast recording, which this is, they had a perfect cast across the board. Everything about it was perfect. I love it to death. If you've never watched or listened to Hadestown, you're doing a huge disservice to yourself. It's absolutely perfect. I'm not going to unbox everything because that would take a lot. Just know that it's a box because there's literally 3 vinyl here, and it's really great packaging. It's a really great show. I would say Hamilton is like a close second as far as the 2010s are concerned. But Hadestown, man, it's so good. So good. Not only my favorite of the 2010s, probably one of my favorite musicals ever. And I'd argue one of the best musicals ever, too. I think what it does with everything, staging, production, it's just so phenomenal. It's so good. But that concludes my entire vinyl collection at this point, as of the recording, which is currently June 1st of 2024. Right now, as far as this time frame is concerned, I have talked about every single vinyl in my collection. It was a lot. And if you did watch this whole series, thank you for spending your time with me. You could have done literally anything else. As I said in the beginning of this episode, any future videos regarding my vinyl collection will just be like vinyl updates. So I purchased this recent vinyl and here's the collection, or here's the stack of new vinyl I got. It will not be any more like Mike's collection of rock records or Mike's collection of reggae records, because I've covered everything I got so far. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this. It was a pretty decent undertaking. It was like 6 videos, probably like 4 hours if I had to guess. But hey, hopefully you watched all of it. If you didn't, the videos are there for you to watch or listen to. And I'll see you on whatever the next thing is we do. Until then, take care.